Hey guys, so I just read something about the coronavirus that is the most sobering thing that I've read yet. It's the most worrying thing that I've read yet. And I wanted to break it down and share this because I think that it has some key takeaways that we all need to think about very carefully. So, the big takeaway here is that we've been talking a lot about the idea of containing the virus, that we just need to flatten the curve. Everybody's going to get it eventually, but if we flatten the curve, we're going to be okay. And if you look at the numbers, what this guy is saying is that we are not going to be okay if we flatten the curve, that we have to do more than just flatten the curve. And I think that his argument is completely convincing, right? So the key kind of things that you need to understand here are how fast the virus reproduces, and that this creates an exponential reproduction. Um, and then how that stresses the healthcare system, and then how the healthcare system basically affects the fatality rate, right? So let me take you through this. People keep thinking that this is like influenza. There's a number of reasons why this is not like influenza. The first one that we need to think about is that coronavirus is novel. This form of coronavirus is novel to virtually everyone it is exposed to, who's exposed to it. So any given strain of influenza, right, there are some similar strain of it that has gone through the population recently, and a lot of people will have residual immunity to it. So because of that, influenza only infects between 9 and 45 million people a year in the United States. That's between 5 to say 12 or 13% of the population. Because coronavirus is a novel virus, it could impact 40 to 70% of the population. So you can see that that's vastly higher, right? Way more people are going to be infected if we don't control this. Essentially, the way a virus works is as long as there's a pool of people who it can infect, who are connected to the person who has it, it will replicate itself. And will replicate itself at a given rate, given the characteristics of the disease. But as long as that rate is above, one infection in addition to the person who's infected, and then you have an exponential scale, right? The reproductive rate of coronavirus is 3.8 in an uncontrolled fashion, right? Before people try to intervene in it. And so we're looking at a doubling rate every 7 days. So people look at the numbers right now and say, this is not bad. This isn't as bad as flu, right? But they're not projecting out what those numbers look like. So for instance, last Tuesday, there were 500 cases that had been documented in the United States. And the Tuesday before that, it was like 230. And the Tuesday before that, it was like 97, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on those numbers, but it's approximately that. This Tuesday, it's 1,000, right? If you project out that continued doubling rate, you're going to see a situation like what's happening in Italy in about 2 weeks. And you can see that the numbers are eerily similar in Italy and Germany, et cetera. You can see this doubling rate taking place in the exponential growth. And what happens is once you reach a certain point, then the number of people who are infected becomes greater than the number of hospital beds that are available. It becomes this huge stress to the healthcare system. Now, what was incredibly sobering about what I read recently is there's two really key things to understand. There's been a lot of people who've been speculating that coronavirus, like flu, will have a lot of people who are asymptomatic who are carrying the virus. What this means is that there's a big pool of people who are immune, right? So the virus will tail off much faster if this is true in its reproduction. The data out of the WHO's most recent studies in China shows there's almost no asymptomatic cases, right? So what that tells you is the case fatality rates are higher than a lot of people have been hoping, and that this thing won't slow down as fast as people have been hoping. And if you look at Wuhan, basically 50,000 people were infected in a population of 11 million people. That's 0.5% of the population, or just under 0.5% of the population. That completely destroyed their healthcare system, right? They did not have enough beds. They did not have enough respirators. They had to open new things. And so they went into this intense quarantine in order to control the virus. That's 0.5% of the population, right? Now imagine that this virus can impact 40 to 70% of the population. What are we going to do for healthcare If just at 0.5, it's completely overwhelmed. If this thing can get anywhere near 40%. At 0.5%, you see a massive increase in the case fatality rate for this. So in compared to places that are under a critical ratio, right? So in Wuhan, the case fatality rate is 5.8. So for 100 people who get this, almost 6 of them will die. For 1,000 people, 58 will die, right? This is massively higher, right? This is 50, 60 times higher than what you see in the flu. And the thing that people aren't talking about with this is the case morbidity rate. How many people have to be hospitalized? And that's 15% have to be hospitalized. 20% have to be hospitalized. 15% require intensive care, right? Or 10% maybe. It's a very high number. Okay, so by comparison, in flu, right, hospitalization is like a tenth of a percent of all of the cases that get flu. So this is just scales. It's orders of magnitude more impactful on the healthcare system. So right now you can say, oh, this just looks like a flu season. But if this scales up, as it is scaling up, you're going to look at, nobody being able to get the healthcare that they need. And once you surpass that, it's incredibly dangerous. So as I was saying, 5.8% of people in Wuhan died from having this, people who had it. In the rest of China, outside of Hubei province, which is where Wuhan is, the case fatality rate is 0.7, right? So that's just, say, 7 times higher than flu. That's bad. It's a very bad flu season. It's nothing like 5.8. 5.8 is devastating. So when you allow this thing to overwhelm your medical care system, you see this massive increase in its potential to kill people. We're seeing the same thing in Lombardy now, right? In Lombardy, in Italy, the case fatality rate is 8%. Okay? Now, and people are saying, oh, well, this is slowing down in China, this is slowing down in South Korea, this is slowing down in Singapore. We don't need to worry about it. It's only slowing down because those countries have taken extraordinary measures that we've never taken before to control something like a pandemic. 760 million people are in quarantine in China. In Italy, the entire population is now quarantined, right? If we don't take action as early as possible on this, we're going to be facing the exact same situation, right? And if we wait too long, we're going to see these massively increased fatality rates for this disease compared to what we could have if we were on top of this. So that's what we need to understand, right? If you say if 20% of the people who get this go to the hospital and it's increasing exponentially very quickly, we're going to be completely out of beds. And then we're going to lose our healthcare workforce as well, because they're going to be overstressed. They're going to be getting this disease. All right. I shared something that showed this is going to happen basically in May. Sometime in May, depending on the doubling rate, depending on, the base of how many people started, when this got started, how fast it replicated initially. We don't know, because the testing has been horrible. We have the worst testing record in the world right now in the States, or at least in any of the major, OECD countries. So we don't know how bad this is in the US, but it's not a pretty picture. So the central message here is that flattening the curve is not enough, because if you just flatten the curve, we're going to continue to produce cases that can overwhelm the medical care system for ages, right? If it's 0.5% of the population, just say that number overwhelms your medical care system. And you have the potential to infect 40 to 70% before this thing slows down on its own, right? You flatten that curve and you could be going for months and months and months at overwhelm, right? For 6 months into doing 0.5%, right? 3% of the population has now got this. You still got 37% if it only goes to 40, that you still have to get through before this virus runs its course. You have to put in place containment measures that are sufficient to bring the reproductive number below 1%, as has been done in China. And the faster you do that, the fewer people are going to die. I'm not telling people to panic, but we need to contact our elected officials about this. We need to, we need to practice social distancing. We need to practice really good hygiene. We need to slow this down as much as possible so that the right strategies can be put in place, because this is not the flu, and it is potentially the largest pandemic in human history in absolute terms. You know, this isn't the bubonic plague, it's not smallpox, it's not going to kill that number of people who are infected. But as far as its absolute numbers, like, we're looking at something that could kill more people than any disease has ever killed in a single year in human history. Um, we should be concerned. Panicking doesn't help. We have time, right? We're still at the beginning stages of this disease in most countries, but we don't have that much time, right? The US is probably about 12 days behind where the situation is in Italy. And Italy is at the situation where they've had to quarantine their entire country. So that's how fast this is coming. So just be aware and do what you can to make sure that we're slowing this thing down and we're advocating for the right policies from our elected officials. That's my message today, guys. I wish it was more hopeful. If my numbers don't make sense to you, if the numbers in the article don't make sense to you, please let me know. You know, I'm really not that great of a math guy, but I think that what we're seeing here is something extraordinary, and very deeply concerning. And, you know, I'm just sharing it because I don't see a lot of people who are looking at all the data and sharing it. And, you know, I happen to have a big platform through my work, and you guys need to know. So I hope that is useful. Please let me know. Talk to you later.